Hi there, this is Solitarian from Solitarian Films, and welcome to part 3 of my Satyajit Ray series. And today's film is his 1958 masterwork, The Music Room. This is the Criterion Blu-ray, which is region B, number 573. I would highly recommend it. This is Ray's third film, even though it's his fourth as far as release. The star Chubby Biswas, in the middle of shooting, went away to Berlin to accept an award. So during that time, Ray made The Philosopher's Stone, which is a comedy, bizarrely, which I don't have, and as far as I know isn't available in DVD or Blu-ray or anything. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, because I'd be interested to actually see it. And then he came back and finished The Music Room, but that was probably a good thing because it gave him more time to think about the main character. Satyajit Ray was a huge music fan. From a young age he loved Western classical music. He was right into Beethoven, and he also grew to love the Indian music as well, which, strangely enough, the Indian traditional music has kind of similar sounds to Japanese traditional music. Anyway, Ray once said that music was actually more important to him than film. So he wanted to make a film about music. And it's a kind of character study about a landowner, played by Chubby Biswas, which you never get tired of saying his name. And he plays a landowner who is obsessed with music and his music room, and putting on recitals despite the fact that the coffers are running low. He sells his wife's jewels, literally the family jewels, just because he's obsessed with impressing people. And he has a neighbour who builds his own house, and he's the son of a moneylender, which Lord Roy looks down his nose at, essentially, because as he says at some point in the film, you know, he can never be the same as me because he doesn't have the blood. So at first, when we see him, he basically doesn't know what month it is. The palace that he lives in is decrepit and falling apart, and we get a flashback which lasts up until about the 50-minute mark in the film, to see how he actually got into this position. Certain things happen. For those who haven't seen the film, I won't spoil, but tragedy strikes. It's your classic riches to rags story, not rags to riches. And then it comes back after the flashback, and then he decides to have one last hurrah, one last music room recital to get one up on his neighbour. And obviously I'm not going to spoil the ending. If you're not convinced that Ray is a great filmmaker by watching The Music Room and Pather Panchali, then you're probably not going to be impressed at all. But to be honest, I can't really see anybody not being impressed by those two films. I hope you're impressed by those two films, and you want to go out and buy more of these things, more of these films, because they're well worth seeing. This one is about so much. He gets money from obviously owning land, but the land is slowly being swept away by the river Ganges. His land is being slowly swept away by modernity. He still has his white horse and his elephant, whereas his neighbour has cars and trucks. There's a beautiful famous scene where he goes out of his palace, just briefly out of his palace, because he doesn't really go out of his palace anymore, and he sees his elephant grazing in the distance, and then of course one of his neighbour's trucks comes down the road, which again is just a culture clash of the modern world encroaching into this post-colonial world, because the Indian class system had one level, and then you had the landowners, and then when the British came in, they kind of kept landowners that were kind of not necessarily on the British side, but kind of, and then once the British left, they were kind of still left there. He's not a particularly cruel landowner. He's just completely feckless and obsessed with music to the point where nothing else really matters, and he just lives in this little bubble. So despite of who he is and what he actually stands for, you do actually kind of feel for him at some points in the film, and other times you're just like, what are you doing? It's, again with Ray, it's a simple story. None of Ray's films have kind of convoluted plots or anything like that. Again, I'll use the term that I always use for Ray films. His films are deceptively simple, but this one is just about so much, and his eye for composition is just spectacular again. Subrata Mitra was his DP, which was for the Apu trilogy as well, and he did also a few later films with Ray, and he does such a great job, because again you have to remember they didn't have great cameras, they didn't have a lot of money to make these films, they didn't have a lot of equipment, but they look absolutely beautiful. Again, there's images that are just kind of burned in your mind. His wife and his son go out to see sick in-laws while he has a music recital, and it's in the middle of stormy season. So while this recital's going on, there's close-ups of Chubby Biswas. Yes, I'm going to keep saying his name. And you can see he's getting a little bit tense as he sees out the corner of his eye the lightning and the thunder out the window, and there's a nice shot of a bug struggling in his glass of wine. It's just little things, little details that Ray is just so good at, because again, he doesn't do, you know, big show-offy things. Apart from anything else, I doubt he ever had access to a crane to do crane shots or anything. His filmmaking and scene building is very subtle and full of little minute things. It's such a rich film that you can go back and watch it again and again, and you'll see different little things and you'll get different things out of it. It's obviously a film about class, it's a film about obsession, it's a film about the changing worlds. The lead character says, you know, he's not prepared to change. People have kind of said it's Ray's Citizen Kane, as far as, you know, it shows a character who's unwilling to change and is stubborn and ends up losing everything that he loves or cares for. It's a haunting film. It's a film, like I said, with images that you won't forget, but again, simple compositions, not showy in any way, shape or form, and it's just a great film. So please let me know in the comments below whether you've seen The Music Room. I would recommend picking up the Criterion. You get a 131 minute documentary from 1984 about Ray. There's also 2011 interviews with Andrew Robinson, who did a Ray biography, and filmmaker Mira Nair, who did Salon Bombay. And there's also a 1981 French roundtable discussion with Ray. And there's also a very nice booklet, because I forgot to mention the chandelier is kind of a key motif throughout the film. So we see it in all its glory, then we see it covered in cobwebs, we see it covered over with bats flying around it, and then we see it lit for the last time, but then slowly the lights start going out as dawn approaches. There's a very nice image of Ray, because he always comes across as being a really cool dude, and there's lots of lovely images. I mean, because again, unlike a lot of Indian films, Ray did most of his shooting on location, which again gives his films a sense of realism, rather than most of the Indian films at that time were shot in the studio, which made them look a little bit artificial. It should be said also, the music originally wanted the music to feature more heavily, but during the break he kind of decided that the story should be about this character, and he really gets into the mind of this character, so the music takes a little bit of a backseat, but the people that were involved with the music were pretty much top of the game at that time in Indian music. So there's a couple of set pieces, again with the scene with the storm, and also he pretty much uses almost all of his remaining money on the big hurrah at the end to get a dancer in, and that set piece is rather spectacular as well. You could argue that the musical numbers perhaps go on a little bit too long, but that's kind of a minor, that's really a minor thing. Again, it was, when I first saw this, it does give you a view into a kind of foreign, exotic world. Because certainly when I saw it, I hadn't heard music like that before. Very much when you watch Japanese films, or period Japanese films, and they have kind of traditional no theatre and traditional Japanese music. As far as coming from the West, it is alien to you at the start, but then you just get used to it. So that's the music room, and it's quite fantastic. So out of the 3 films that I've talked about so far, 2 of them are great films. Pather Panchali and The Music Room are both wonderful films, and Aparahito is really very good. Like I said, I don't have the Philosopher's Stone. I haven't seen the Philosopher's Stone. Again, this is just a quick comedy he did while waiting for Chubby Biswas. Got his name in right at the end. But again, let me know if you know of a copy of the Philosopher's Stone anywhere. And hopefully we'll see you for part 4, which will be the final part of the Apu trilogy. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again. This is the Solitude Ronin saying farewell.